Am I recording? Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our book club. For today, we are looking at Angie Thomas's "The Hate You Give," New York New York Times bestseller list. Among other accolades that she has received, it's also been made into a film. But for today, we're only focusing on the text. We have with us, let me just introduce our book club members. We have with us Ali from Iraq, Huda from Iraq, Jennifer from Malaysia, Maisara from Malaysia, Ranjini from Malaysia, Rebecca from Malaysia, and Shahira also from Malaysia. My name is Raihana. This is part of our graduate course, but for this book club session, we're focusing primarily on every reader's response to this particular text. And we decided to go with Shahira to get the ball rolling. So Shahira, it's all yours. A little bit louder though. The mic might be a little bit soft, or volume might be a little bit low.
Hello, is this better?
Again?
Is this better?
Yes.
The volume?
Yes.
All right, so for the text, The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, I didn't really focus on any certain chapters, but instead I noticed the relationship between the main character's star Carter with her white best friend Haley and her white boyfriend Chris. I think the whole book is about race relations in America between the whites and the blacks. So in the star Amara Carter character, she has two personalities. She's from Garden Heights, which is like low income community, but she goes to school at Williamson, which is like a private prep school. Mainly the students are mainly white. So she has two best friends, Haley and Maya. And Maya is Chinese from the parents are probably immigrants from Taiwan, because she said she went to Taiwan. But then you can see Haley, who's also their best friend, so one of the trio. But she's like she's racist, but maybe in the beginning not very apparent.
Who do you mean, Maya?
Haley.
Haley.
So she makes all these comments like when Star asked her to come for a sleepover, and she said something about she didn't want to her dad didn't want her spending a night in the ghetto, so that has a negative connotation. And then her comment about the fried chicken. So in America, fried chicken is a dish in the south part, so it's mainly eaten by the blacks. And just the way she said it, and I think at first Star was denying all these racist comments made by her best friend, but after the shooting, she started to realize this. And like throughout the books, I actually mark 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 sections where Haley was being racist. So we have that one racist character, but then when we look at Chris, who's also white, who lives in a predominantly white, rich neighborhood, but he's being understanding with Star's situation. You have their common interest is the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and they share a common interest with their interest in sneakers, and he's just trying to understand the blacks and whites relationship in America, and he made an effort to understand Star's relationship with Khalil and how it affects her. And then he also went to the protests, despite like at first he was being hesitant, but then he went. So I think it's I think it's really nice that Angie Thomas actually created these two characters, and you can see like there's two end of the spectrum of the white people in America. So you have the racist Haley, and you have the very understanding Chris, and like at the end how Chris managed to blend in with the family. He's sort of accepted into the family as Star's boyfriend, and you have like Star in the middle, navigating the relationship. Yeah, so that's what I mainly got from the text.
All right, thank you. So Chris appears more empathetic.
Yes, empathetic. Doctor, sorry, I think my line is.
No, I can't. You know, Dr. Rahana is stuck.
Yeah.
The line is
Yeah.
the
Her line.
her line,
Okay.
not ours.
Hello?
Hello.
So what happened? I got disconnected. I didn't touch the screen. I just got kicked out.
This happens.
Yeah. So you were saying, is everybody here?
Yes, Doctor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Shahira?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay. So I like what you said about, you know, the difference between Haley, who appears to use stereotypes in the way she deals with Star, and Chris, who seems to make the effort to understand, to be more empathetic, to imagine himself somebody from that community, you know, whereas Haley seems to have a more a distant, you know, imagine with stereotypes, with racist comments generally, you are basing it on what not personal first-hand experience, but what you've read or what you've seen in the popular media. So she's using that even though she is, you know, dealing with Star on a daily basis at school, right? So you've got the two ends of the spectrum, as you said. So I like that very much. Does anybody want to take up from that discussion? Who wants to go next?
Doctor, I'll go next.
Okay. Are we still recording, by the way?
Yes, recording.
Yes.
Okay.
The
Jennifer, go ahead.
Okay, so what I found interesting in this book is actually the language that the blacks, or you can say the white, they use, like how they speak to each other, especially for Star, because like from the first chapter, it's already mentioned that she doesn't belong here and stuff like that. So it's like the way she talks, she has to change. Like back at her community, she has to be a little bit tough. So her language kind of gives off like what perhaps we see in the media, like the slangs that they use. But then when she goes back to her school, she kind of like shift to be a more gentle, like how the white speak. So it's like the way that she has to shift, and in the end she chose not to do that with her friends. And she kind of like embraced, like, I'm just gonna, both sides are me, and in terms of how I speak, I'm just gonna, you know, speak accordingly. And also like how the parents and how they actually talk to each other, that language, it seems kind of harsh. It's kind of like tough love. So yeah, to me that was the interesting thing that I noticed throughout the book. Yeah.
You know, if we think about it in our own context, do we do that? Do we shift in our language use? I mean, like, you know, you use standard English, and then maybe in another context you might you might have a more, a
Yes.
variation of it. Do
It
you
does.
have that experience?
It's like
Yeah,
me speaking in
think we do that.
English and Mandarin, and you just switch ish. So yeah, that's kind of fun.
If you can just reflect for a moment, how do you make that decision when to switch from more standard, more formal usage to a more informal usage? When do you switch? Like, is there a particular group of people that you use formal English with? Is there a particular group of people that you kind of break into a more lingo, a Manglish version? Is there a kind of strategy that you use?
Uh, I'm not sure whether it's strategy or not. It's just like the place that I would be, and if it's with my friends, or maybe if it's like new acquaintance, and then you try to be not so crazy, so you speak nicely, and then when you get to know each other, and then that's when it's like, whoa, yeah. So I guess that's
So the
it.
decision is how comfortable you feel.
Yeah, probably,
Oh,
and
is
how my
that-
friends are comfortable in the setting.
is that the same with everyone else?
I think with new people, with outsiders, you tend to speak more formally. But when you're with your friends or your families, and then like with friends, you have university friends, and then you have school friends. So there's that difference as well, I think.
So again, the level of comfort. The more comfortable you are, the less you need to use the formal and standard English. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Rebecca, did you want to say something?
Well, for me, is I was thinking like how I kind of talk very politely, very nicely, especially with elders. It's like, oh, I can't really be myself, because if I tend to be myself, it'd be like, why is this girl so impolite? So I have to even change the way I act, the way I talk, the way I think. Yeah, so I was just thinking about that. And I can be different with my own peers, with my own age group, or even with the younger children. I tend to be different. I become more compassionate. I become more, more kiddie kind of slang, very childish. So yeah, I think it depends on comfort and
Right.
yeah.
So in Rebecca's case, it's the reception of the other that dictates how what kind of English usage you use. That means with elders, they expect you to behave a certain way. They want you to be more polite. So you respond to them appropriately. Whereas with your friends, you kind of like so it's not just about me and what I want to do, but it is also how I'm received by the other that dictates your choice of usage of language and how formal and informal. Anybody else has another experience? Well, let's have a listen to our friends from Iraq. Is it the same in Arabic, Huda and Ali? Do you have like I know there is standard Arabic or very formal Arabic, like the Quran is very, very classical Arabic, but there is also formal and informal register. So when you are speaking Arabic, do you have a kind of that register, very formal register, informal register in Arabic?
Of course, doctor.
How do you decide to switch from one to another?
Among our friends or our family or relatives, those who are so close for us, we usually speak open with them, more open. And as Rebecca said, that emotional, maybe more emotion. And we can't speak with everyone the same, because maybe the on the opposite side, he can't understand you because he don't know your real personality.
Right.
This is one. And as for as even our experts in for example, my colleague here in this post-colonial, we have kind of jargon between us.
Right.
So yes, there is formal and there is the those who you are open with them and you can say whatever you want, so you will not be misunderstood by others.
Got it.
I the same, doctor.
Ali, did you want to add to that?
Yes, doctor. Also, according to the social tradition in our community there. The way that I am talking is so different from the others that they are talking. Okay, and also when I see someone and want to talk for him for the first time, it's so different from the others that I have know them as, for example, my friends or my neighbors and so on. So the way of talking or speaking with them, it will be so different from the others.
The reason I'm spending a little bit more time on this issue is because one of the things that Jennifer said just now was that Star, the central character, the African-American character who lives in the low income all black community, as Shahira has summarized earlier, and attends an all white, majority white prep school in an all white, majority white neighborhood and area. So she is having to constantly shift from one locality to another, you know. So when she shifts, she's also shifting in terms of her discourse. And one of the things that Jennifer says was, Jennifer said this, that, you know, she does this to fit in. She shifts her own discourse in order to fit in. I mean, it's almost like I'm doing this consciously because I want you to accept me as one of you. So if I'm in this context and I'm using the language in this way, I want you to see me as I'm one of you. So it's a little bit in terms of themes, it's the idea of identity politics. So I'm using language and I'm using how I use my discourse and my language and my register in order to show identification with the larger group. So I need you to kind of also mind that sometimes we use language as a form of identity politics, you know, to show either distance between us or closeness between us, you know. So just have that at the back of your mind as you read this text further. All right, so thank you for that, Jennifer. Who would like to go next?
Can I return?
Yes, please, Ali.
Yes. I'm gonna to talking about exactly the theme of racism that I see through this novel, The Hate You Give. And I see that theme exactly focus on the character of Star. That is 16 years old. Star Carter has to live in two different worlds. Garden Heights, the poor black people neighborhood, where she was born and raised, and her fantasy white people school, Williamson, in the suburbs. It was so difficult for her because she has to be two different persons in two different places, as we talked about that. Her already complicated life becomes more complicated when she is the only witness of a police officer shoots his unarmed best friend Khalil. So about this accident, the news about that becomes a national issue and attracts many attention, especially when the folks know that Khalil is black and he is unarmed when the police officer shoots him. The theme of racism, I found it in exactly at chapter 11, when he said, "Daddy once told me there is a rage passed down to every black man from his ancestors. For in the moment they couldn't stop the slave's master from hurting their families. Daddy also said there is nothing more dangerous than when that rage is activated." So this is show us the suffer of a Star with her community when she witnesses two police officers attack Maverick. Star links racism, contemporary law enforcement with the historical enslavement of black people to show that black families carry generational trauma and that current anger has been building for centuries. This connection draws a comparison between the police and slave masters because slave masters function as legal authorities over their slaves and justified their abuse as maintaining order. Just as the officer justified their search of Maverick as maintaining order in the neighborhood. Angie Thomas shows us that black men have to outlet for their justified anger over feeling powerless to protect their families, because expressing this anger can lead to their deaths. This is what I want to mention through this novel.
Thank you. Was well said. You know, so you know, you covered a few things. A similar converging element with the first perspective, Shahira's perspective, looking at racism. And another thing that you took up was this issue of it's not a one person's experience, right? It's an experience that is shared historically. You talk about the rage of the black man, how the historical enslavement caused generational trauma. So it's almost like you're born into a society that you inherit the trauma from your ancestors.
Yes.
And in, you know, as you were saying this, in my note, I wrote, so what's Angie Thomas's take on this? And immediately you said, it's almost like you read my mind, Ali, well done. Immediately you said the justifiable actions of the black man. So it's almost like a lot of the things that they are doing is justifiable because of this historical enslavement that they have the baggage in their past and current present as well.
Exactly.
But this is not something that I'm expecting in an answer at this point, but you know, you look at the big picture. Both Shahira and Ali have identified how the teenage star has to live this dual world. You know, it's almost like, you know, you live you're living in one world and in another world. What will happen to you when you do this, when you're constantly going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth? There must be some kind of integration, assimilation. Some things will affect you, right? You will shed some things from this context and maybe shed some things from that context, and you become the third space. You know, there is that concept in cultural studies called the third space. So you're neither this, you're neither that. You're neither one or the other, nor the other. You are in between. So maybe we need to also explore what Angie Thomas, the big picture, if you kind of consider this, the microcosm of it is, yes, there is this rage of the black man that Star and her generation of African American teens are inheriting. That's number one, for sure, without a doubt. And then you have to ask yourself, the writer is also inheriting this rage through her ancestors, through her forefathers and foremothers. And she's writing this story. What do you think she is trying to achieve? If it's just to capture the rage, there are other stories that's done that. There are lots of other stories that's captured that same rage in different formats. It could be songs, it could be movies, right? Plays, poetry, novels, you know, for centuries now. What else is Angie Thomas trying to achieve? So that's something I want to kind of like for us to just remind ourselves, so that at the back of our mind, we ask ourselves, what's the big picture that this particular story that has drawn a lot of attention? Yeah, it's you know, a lot of people have gravitated to this story, and the fact that none of us here are African American and we can still relate to the story also says something about the power of this particular story, how it's a microcosm for something bigger, and what that something bigger is might be different for each and every one of us. So I just want us to kind of keep that at the back of our mind, and we might sum that up towards the end of the discussion. Okay, now who would like to go next? Thank you very much, Ali. That was brilliant. Who would like to go next?
Thank you, Farah, Doctor.
Anna?
Who would like to go next? Huda?
Huda, yes.
Yes, okay, go ahead.
Well, the story is about African American black people, and they are treated in just unjust way and inferiority and discrimination. I think this is the story all about, but there is something as if it is hidden. That's what makes us connected to it. It is the injustice and this that prevail in all the world, even in the same community. As you see, they all of them, they are minority, they are treated inferiority, and but the dilemma is your own people who supposed to support you and back you, they intimidated you and suppress you as well as the other. This what makes people I don't know, it's I think make this connection with this sort of story. I like it because that's what the make other people invulnerable and make them exposed to other that they cannot even right the wrong thing. I think this is the spirit of this, and this is the spiritual theme of this story. Well, I have something here. As for, you know, Star and her name. Her name, it means hope. Even her father, when he called her and named her Star, he said she is the hope, she is the light in my dark and crucial situation. And as if he was, there is potential in her, expectation, great expectation in her, as if he was inspired to call her Star, the light in the dark, in the night. All right. She is a potential leader of the protester. She can't. She's very brave, and I think this goes to her family and her father, because her father was, as she said in, she's so brave and self-composed. In chapter 2, when the policeman came to and order Khalil to show him his identifications, and to pull over, she recalled the memory of a 12 years old girl when her father were giving her, you know, lecture about how to act around the police. She is very, we could say, she thinks very much before she took an action. She is a Star, her name, as if she is shading lights whenever she goes. That's why she was a support for so many neighbors and friends and so on. And the bravery that she got, she said, my parents, in chapter 1, page 21, she said, my parents haven't raised me to fear the police, just to be smart around them. They told me it's not smart to move while a cop has his back to you. So the cops, as if they are, what we call it, this is their, they fear them so much because there are so many from the black people, the African American were killed because of, you know, randomly shoot or unjustified shooting. We have, as for Khalil, and this trial that this trial, he said in chapter 12, that's the so-called gun. The lawyer said, the lawyer, Mr. Ovra explains, Officer Cruz claims he saw in the car door and assumed Khalil was reaching for it. The handle was thick enough, black enough, and Khalil was black enough, as the father said, Star's father said. So he was killed because his hairbrush. This is the most unjustified and injustice in this story. I think this is my main points, Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Huda. Awesome. So a couple of things that came out of which came out of your session, your presentation. You talked about the injustice, how this book has levels of injustice, right?
Yes.
So you talked about the injustice between the African American and the whites. Yes. And you talked about how this injustice is almost something that is shared throughout the world, that we can relate to the story, largely because we also experience different levels of injustice in our own pockets of the world, whether we are in the Middle East or in parts of India or Africa or the Caribbean or Southeast Asia and China and all the rest of it. But you also said that there's a kind of biasness or a vulnerability being exposed to the African American by their fellow African American. Do you want to explain that a little bit more? What do you mean by that, and in which instances was this happening?
I said the King Gang, they are black American, African American. They are as if they are the tool. How can by which the white people oppress and intimidate those who are they call them the black, by their own people, and this is the dilemma. You can see it wherever you want, Doctor. This is the injustice that prevail in all, as we say in chapter 9, page 92. The sun said we were the middle of saying grace over. So they are harmless. They are peaceful. Just they want to share their meal, and then this brother, their own people, they came and shoot them, and as if the tool of the others. So this is injustice, and this what make people still minority, and to keep being minority and keep discriminated and keep to be treated in injustice.
So there's a kind of ignorance that cripples your fellow community members. Yes. This is what you're trying to say, right? Like we cause our own people to not be able to lift themselves out of poverty or wherever the situation it is that they are experiencing, and there is that kind of ignorance that holds everybody back, right? Yes. So maybe that is the aspect of vulnerability, and back to the point that Jennifer made earlier, how to the extent that your language use also signals whether you are with them or against them. So imagine not speaking in a particular language or a particular way and being seen as an outsider because of your choice of language or your choice of discourse, right? For those of you who speak multiple languages, imagine using English when you should be using Malay or Mandarin or Tamil or Arabic or whatever other languages. Imagine in a context where you are with your family members and your immediate relatives, and you resort to using English, right? So it's almost like saying by using a language that is outside the group's language, you have identified yourself as an outsider. Maybe that's also an issue that causes the community to be biased against their own kind. I mean, it's like you are expected to behave a certain way, speak a certain language, maybe dress a certain way even, and live in a certain part of the country. But here you are wanting to uplift yourself, wanting to go to a better school, wanting to live in a better neighborhood where the crime rate is lower, maybe, right? So doing so kind of ostracizes you, makes you other of your own community. So in a multicultural context like that, multiracial context like that, you are having this burden of fitting into your own community. So I think that's what I got from Huda's presentation. Did I get that right, Huda?
Yes, Doctor.
Yeah. And I like also what you said, how, there are levels of complexities, so you've got that intra-communal kind of tension between people of the same community. Then you've got the intercommunal or interracial kind of tension between the African American and the white. Then you also have within the family unit, what is the father trying to do within the family unit? So Huda, you talked about how he gave Star the name to symbolize the great expectation that he has for her, right? As the youth of today, the kind of things that he wants for her. Maybe, the things that he couldn't live out for himself, he is hoping for his child. This is something that we do. These are some strategies that minorities, people of the minority situation does. When we discuss Born a Crime, you will see that how Trevor's mom does exactly the same thing. That great expectation that she has for him as the next generation, based on all the things, the struggles that she has gone through. She wants him to live a better life, to change the situation, not to live the same kind of a situation. So the father has that as well. And the bit that Huda talked about the training that he inculcates in her, how to act in the company of a police officer, right?
Yes.
It's a fine line between fear on the one hand and being smart on the other. Right? But if you look at the big picture, like you're in your own country, you're a citizen of this country. A couple of weeks back, Ali and Huda shared about their experience when the US soldiers are patrolling, and if you're driving there and they might just whimsically offer the gun to your face, and you're not sure whether you will survive that. I remember both Ali and Huda had a very emotional sharing experience that you are living in your own country, and then you've got these outsiders coming in, supposedly giving protection to the people and the land, but actually doing the reverse. Yes. But in this context, in the hate you give, what Huda shared just now is policing is happening by your own American citizen towards policing and protecting your own American. Yet, even within that, there are kind of a hierarchy of freedom, if you like, right? Some are more free than others. We will look into this theme of, some are more free than others when we read Animal Farm, a couple of books from now. One of the things that the pigs likes to say in that book, 4 legs good, 2 legs better. There's always a kind of a relational variation. We like to assume we are all equal, but we like to also assume some are more equal than others, or some are more superior than others. The kind of language that we use, the discourse that we use to assert that difference. Yeah. So two things came out from that, from what Huda shared just now. This element of fear, difference between fear and being smart. That's a theme that warrants a discussion. You know, what's the difference between being fearful and being smart? Is it your approach to it, your confidence in it during the whole time? So the chapter that Huda pointed out when Khalil told Star, keep your hands up, you know, don't whatever you do, don't reach, you know, for your leg or your inside of the car, just in case they think you're reaching for something like a gun or whatever. So being smart. It's almost like saying in your own country, you constantly have to be mindful and watchful because you might be assumed as a criminal.
Yes.
That's the kind of a relationship that is being offered between the African American and the white policeman or policeman generally. So this is another issue that can be discussed and pursued further. All right. So thank you very much, Huda. Who's next?
I go next, Dr. Ranjini.
Ranjini, go ahead.
Okay, the book was first, it was an easy read for me. I think the author presented the teenage point of view quite well, because at times I felt like the narrative was, how do I say it? A bit childish probably, but then I realized it's because it was presented from a teenage point of view, so the author really captured the sense of teenage world quite well. Also, I feel like we read the novel at the right time, since the issue of the murder of Ahmad Abari is going on, and I was reading about it and feeling really frustrated about the blacks' predicament. I think another part I like to pick up is that Angie succeed in giving a background knowledge of what's really make the people to deal with drugs. It's not they're forced to do because they're kind of the situation they're handling and so on. I like that part as well. But today the issue I want to focus on is not about discrimination but about violence. Okay, but I'm also in no way disregarding the discrimination faced by the Black American. But for the purpose of this text, I'm going to focus on gun violence. See, the Second Amendment of the U.S. says that the U.S. citizen has the right to bear arms. The right to keep and bear arms is right for people to possess weapons for their own defense. Previously, I had few colleagues from U.S. and we always debated about this. For them, they think it's necessary for them to bear arms because they told me that they use it for hunting, something like that. But from my perspective, I think all the major problem of this is because the amendment that gives the citizen the right to bear arms. So let's take the first text that I want to focus on. The one that Huda mentioned as well, the talk that the father has. So he tells the kids that Star, do whatever they tell you to. He said, keep your hand visible. Don't make any sudden moves. Only speak when they speak to you. So doctor mentioned that it's like basically being smart, and then although you are being a citizen, the thought that you're treated as criminals, and you pointed about that, right? But I want to take account where the police themselves, they overreacting because they're afraid of dying themselves. The people that they flag down for checks could easily pull the trigger on the police because all of them, everyone and anyone can carry a gun. The threat of dying because of gun is very real in the US. How many school shootings we have read in the news so far? I feel like they have once in almost every week, but yet they are not recognizing that the rights to bear arms is like the huge threat in US. So if you think about all this, of course I feel quite guilty that I'm focusing on this when the discrimination faced by Black Americans is another huge thing by its own self. But for this text, I'm picking on the gun violence, because I feel like the moment they amend their second amendment to restrict civilians from bearing arms, I think the gun violence will go at least a notch down. If let's say, like, look at Malaysia, I personally have the the police number balai that's closest to my house, few numbers, because for me, when I have any problems or anything, like my first thought is look for the police.
Right.
They will help us.
Right.
But for the Black Americans, they're afraid of the police. And although they have their own issues, but let's think from the perspective of police themselves. Like I mentioned, they're afraid of dying because they flag down a car and then they want to check because maybe the cars like without any lights or anything like that. So even in this situation, when Khalid turned to grab the brush, right, hairbrush, the police probably thought that it's a gun. So he overreacted. I assume he overreacted. I don't know what's the logic behind that. Why does he turns over and pick up the hairbrush? I don't get that part quite well. It's confusing. Right. So if from police perspective, it can be easily a gun, which at that time the police is thinking I'm gonna die. He's picking up a gun. He's gonna shoot at me. So he shoot the boy first. Of course, it's wrong. But then this is what happens if you let every citizens the rights to bear arms. You're going to be afraid that the trigger's going to be on you every single time. So that's what I think my focus has always been on gun violence. I'm quite interested on this actually. I always been reading about this. I just don't understand why they let the citizen to bear arms. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, first of all, let's not feel guilty for focusing on an aspect of the story that maybe others are not focusing on, because I think the whole idea of this book club is to encourage everybody to have a perspective and not just to replicate whatever that others are saying online or in the social media or critical studies. So have a perspective. That's important. And Ranjini, maybe you are also taking up Ali's point of that. Is it Ali who said, that some of the things that Angie Thomas is portraying, it's also indirectly hinting at the fact that these actions are justifiable. But in Ranjini's case, you are looking at the police's perspective, right? And there is a component or it's an element of mutual fear, just like the blacks, the African Americans, the minorities may fear the police. Indirectly, or the police are also having that kind of a relationship. They are very much on the offensive and on the defensive rather. They're living off that defensive kind of an attitude. Okay, what if he pulls a gun at me? So I need to protect myself, So, and thank you for bringing up gun violence and the issue of, the real threat of murder by shooting in America. That's something that is pretty common in news, unfortunately. And does Angie Thomas suggest any resolution about the gun violence, Ranjini? Based on your reading, your initial reading, do you get the sense that Angie Thomas says something that we can all agree with about gun violence, about the Second Amendment? Is there something that she hints at?
No, I don't think so, because I feel like when she was writing this novel, the Second Amendment is something that they already used to. They're not questioning it at all. That's like not even going near there. Nope, it's like that's their right. They're not going to talk about it. Yeah. I want to point to this something I forget just now. There's this part where they went to a restaurant and a bulletproof partition separates the customer from the cashier. It's a restaurant where people order food. Why do they need a bulletproof partition there?
Right.
Yeah. That's the another.
She wrote it. It's normal, right?
Right. That's the normal.
Yeah.
That's the normal, if you like, right?
Just
living with that kind of fear.
They should go a little bit more deeper and think about all this gun violence and whether probably by taking away the Second Amendment they could really, get something slow, take this violence a notch down. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Important point, an important case in point as well. Thank you, Ranjini. Who's next? between Sarah and Rebecca?
I go next.
Can.
Everyone has pretty like explained everything already, so let me think. uh, I think the part where I think it's in chapter 2. It's the same thing. Everybody has touched on this, where the parents talked to her about two things when she was 12 years old. Regarding about the youth society in America, where the first thing the mom talks about the birds and the bees at 12. Uh, to compare with my situation, I never have that. I never have the birds and bees kind of talk, even until at this age, you know. So that is something that is very not normal for us, you know, in our community. But for them, it's very normal because they are, in my opinion, they are very sexually active at a very young age. They throw parties like every weekend. It's not common for us. We are told to stay put at home, so they have a different, and in terms of youth growth, they have a different ways to raise their kids. And then the second one is part where the father said about how to do when the cop stop you. So basically, it is not common for us. It is not common anywhere that much. But in America, it is, especially if you're black as a minority. But in this story, we have the blacks, and maybe probably Muslim also experience that in America, and currently maybe Asian as well because of the virus. So this kind of stereotypes. So it is not normal for us to have that. Like it is, you know, when we're 12, our parents talk about don't go out, don't talk to strangers. So in terms of their maturity, the way they think, it's a bit different because of the situation that they're in. Unlike us, I like in my community. I don't know about the Chinese and Indian community in Malaysia, but in my Malay Muslim community, it's like that. It's very conservative, even though it's very flexible. So it's more like in the youth relationship, family kind of stuff. So that's the thing. Another one that I realized, I don't remember which chapter, but it is part where the day when Star is supposed to give her statement to the police, she went to the school in the morning, and she talks about, she has that kind of monologue where she said, when she said that Williamsm Star is different when she's at school than at home, where she has to held in when she speaks. I think everybody already touched this, but in my opinion, it's not about it's not about she's being ashamed of herself. I think, in my opinion, she's trying to show that no matter what color or anything, she's not she's not giving away for people to stereotype her just because she's black. So I know, like, sometimes when I first read it, like in a very flash reading, I was like, oh, she's ashamed of being herself. But it's more about protecting that kind of notion where she's not letting the white people to to say that the stereotype that they were talking about, and to let them to stereotype her like everybody been talking about. So that's the thing. So that's the only thing that I get, because everybody has speaking I spoke about racism and everything. It's already been clear. So that's all for me.
No, that's good. That's really good. Rebecca, you wanna share yours?
Yes, so I'll go last.
No, I will combine my comments from my Sarah and yourself. So yeah.
Okay, yeah. So from me, I have two things that come to my mind. The first one is from the point of view of the author, because while I was reading it, I see like, oh wow, she is an African author, but then she doesn't really homogenize her own race. We can see that she's not giving an image that all Africans are good. We have the character of King and his members. So while I was reading it, it's like she's trying to break this the idea of seeing a community as a whole instead of seeing them as an individual, and homogenizing every individual in the community. So it's very much like stereotyping them.
Right.
Yeah, and the fact that she actually points out there are two kinds of people within the white community, and there are two kinds of people within the African community is very significant. She points out Haley and Chris within the white community, and both of them portrayed their character, or they portray themselves differently. And within the African community, we have like Maverick, or the good kind of African, and also King, who is like he is the head of the gang, and then he does drug, kill people. So you know, I think Angie is very much trying to point out that, hey, we should stop stereotyping. Not all whites are good, and not all Africans are bad either. So instead of seeing them as a whole, why not just see everyone as an individual of who they are, not stereotyping them? And another thing is the process of earning. It's like
process of
earning, like earning credits, earning trust. We can see that there are two groups of people, the in group and the out group. So in Williamson, you can see that the in group are mainly the whites, the out group are the Africans, and in Garden Heights, the in group are the Africans, while the out group are the whites. And you can see that when Star want to blend into the in group where the whites are major, and you can see that what I'm questioning myself, but what is she trying to earn from, you know, when she wants to fit herself into the in group? I think it's very much on the image or reputation. And then you can see that Chris blending in into the African in group, trying to earn trust, especially from the African. The process of earning is different. Two communities, it is so different. You can see that Chris have to earn trust, while Star have to earn her image. And Star and Maya actually laugh along when Haley made racist jokes. So this is like the process of, you know, I have to strip my true nature and try to fit in into the in group that I think has been mentioned earlier. But what came to me is, what are they earning? And the process of, you know, stripping yourself. While Chris, I can't really see much, but I think that I, you know, trying to put myself in Chris' shoes, I'm like, this is a very, very hard process for him. I believe so. Because to be blended into within to the African group is not easy, because, you know, they have painful past. And yeah, so I think I have to prop more on Chris' perspective, but I feel that if I'm in Chris' shoe, it'd be very, very hard to actually blend in. Yeah, so that's from me.
Okay, thank you very much to Maisara and Rebecca. Both of you, you know, I like the fact that we looked at the text in its kind of a more micro level reading. As we move further and further afield, you know, as every presenter kind of like focuses on, or every reader focuses on one aspect, we begin to kind of take a bigger picture perspective of the story. And Maisara looked at two important issues. One is Raising Black. You know, there is also a TV series on that topic. You know, how do you grow up Black in America? What are some of the do's and don'ts that you need to kind of focus on? And you're right. There are a lot of things that we take for granted, right? Living in Malaysia, for instance, that you don't need to educate your child at a certain age on how to survive police treatment. You don't need to teach your child that. Even Ranjini said this, that, you know, you look at, you know, if you've got issues with you know, criminal acts or whatever, your first thought is that where's the number for the police station, you know, where's the nearest police station. That's what Ranjini said, but in America it's not. And Maisara's point is important, that what's the normal for minority parents? How do they raise their children? It's not just about education. It's not just about earning a good living to provide for the kids, to buy the right resources and to give them the right kind of education. It's also to ensure that they survive. They survive their youth, they survive their adult age, they survive potential violence by police. And that kind of a a scary scenario. I just cannot imagine raising a family in that kind of an environment, you know. So that's an important point to make. And the second point that you made, even though others have said the same, you kind of broaden the scope a little bit. You talked about this notion of hyphenated identity. You know, even though Star is not of mixed parentage, she's an African American, yeah. She has one culture and one language and one religion and all the rest of it. But because of this moving from one locality to another for schooling purposes, she kind of developed a hyphenated sense of identity. In K.S. Maniam's The Return, we have the same with Ravi when he goes from the estate to the English school to study and then comes back to live in the estate. So when you don't study or when you don't have formal education in your place where you live and grow up in, especially when it's a multicultural, multiracial kind of a landscape, there is that development of the hyphenated identity. You begin to develop this kind of the third space that I talked about. So I think that's an important point. And her hyphen is the school that she's with. You know, so she refers to the school as her other identity. So it's almost like the locality dictates another sense of identity, another dimension to her identity. So maybe those of you here, you might have the, you know, Bangi persona, or your Bangi identity is different from your other identity. I'm from Penang. And for the longest time, who I am in Penang and who I am in Selangor is completely different. So when I go back, I'm a different person. I feel more relaxed. I feel more myself. I'm very much always on guard when I'm in Selangor, because I feel like I don't fit in completely, the way I speak the language, the way I look and my mannerisms. Whereas in Penang, I feel like that's who I am, you know. And I've spoken to a lot of friends from Penang, and they feel the same as well. When we are away from Penang, there's a kind of a difference that you feel, especially when you're not with other Penangites. I don't know whether others have that same experience. You know, you may want to share that as well. Rebecca talked about even a bigger circle. You know, she took it at a macro level. She looked straight at what Angie Thomas is doing in this book. Number one, not to homogenize any race, be it black or white. You know, that there are different aspects of each community embodied in different characters, and how each character represent a different facet of their own community. So it's almost like saying we all have to take stock of the good and the bad and the ugly in our own community, you know. So that's an important issue. And I like that aspect of earning trust. How do you earn someone's trust, especially if that someone is from a different culture or community or background or ethnicity? What's the extent that you will do? To what extent will you go to kind of earn their trust? Would you speak a certain way? Would you dress a certain way? Would you behave a certain way so that they see you as one of them? And you're right. I found, when I was reading this book, I found the character of Chris incomplete. I don't know whether that's what you said, Rebecca. Is that how you saw it? Because I saw Chris as he's not been fleshed out completely. I feel like he's a convenient character who empathizes with Star. He's almost like the token of the white man or the white character who shows empathy, but I don't understand his motivation. Why is he being empathetic? How did he develop that? What was the root of his sense of empathy? Maybe his parents also had the same kind of a conversation, you know, that, you know, we treat everybody the same. In our family, we treat everybody the same, no matter whether you're black or white or whatever. That aspect is missing. There is that big, to me, there is that big gap in, do you agree?
Yes, I agree. His character is not really I can't really see deeper in a deeper level.
Agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So I felt a little bit let down. I haven't read her second book. My daughter read the second book and she said it's not as good as the first. So you know, I will see how she takes this discussion further. But yeah, but that's those are great issues. Everybody, can we unmute everybody and give everyone a round of applause, please? Seriously, that was brilliant. That was smashing. That was brilliant. So thank you very much for that sharing session. So I don't want to kind of extend this too much, but I'm just going to sum up by saying that, you know, every story that we read, we can find ourselves in it, no matter whether the story is told from our context or someone else's context. And I think this particular book, specifically case in point, as Ranjini says, you know, I like, you know, she thought, what was your words? You felt a little bit annoyed maybe at the beginning with the tone because the language seemed a little bit childish, you said, Ranjini.
Yes.
Largely because it is a young adult genre. So it's very much told from a young adult perspective, but it's able to pitch to all our levels. You know, you've got somebody coming from Iraq, you've got someone from Malaysia, you've got the moms, you've got you know, young adults or adults themselves right now. You've got people from different walks of life in this book club, but somehow we are able to find a particular point of connection to the story. You know, so the story is not that far removed, right? So I like that aspect. So I'm just going to go around the screen, and if you want to have your final say of this discussion. So we're going to begin with Shahira. Do you want to have any final say about, based on all the things that we've talked about and what you've heard other people say, any last points that you want to leave us with, Shahira?
When Ranjini was presenting, I actually checked the amendments in America. There's 27 of them, and the right to bear arms is number 2, except that it was ratified in 1791. So, you know, the fact that Americans are still very, they are still clinging to that and do not want to change that is definitely something else.
Mind-boggling, to say the least. Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Shahira. Jennifer, any concluding thoughts from you?
It's just that to me, this book is really. I actually haven't really thought much about going too deep in this book because I kind of like read it. I just want to enjoy the book, like read how it goes and stuff like that. So to me, this book gives another perspective of Black life, especially a teenager. And during when I was reading this book, fun fact, I was watching the Spider-Man Into the Universe, like multi-universe. So that thing was like, oh, there's like so many things going on. So I kind of related that both book in a funny way. I know this book is supposed to be very heavy. I mean, in a way, because when I read to the end of the chapter, or maybe the acknowledgement, she did give the so-called victims,
right?
And she brought up the Black Lives Matter too and the movement. So it kind of way, it was like I felt that she wrote this book is to let people know, like it's not all you see in the media, but also there's this side to it. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Ali, concluding thoughts?
Yes, Doctor. For me, I see that everyone has to live in the way that you want to live, without any discrimination that he faced from the others. And as I see that Star has to endure the pain of witnessing the injustice Khalil gets from their society, because the people are more interested in Khalil's past rather than the fact that he is called by a police officer. So this refers to the way that everyone have to live his community without any racism, without any difficulties, without any things that make him live in a difficult way. This is what I want to refer to.
All right, thank you very much. Huda, concluding thoughts from you? Huda?
Hello.
Hi, Huda. Yes. Any concluding thoughts from you?
Yes, just trying to, level up. It will make you special, maybe outsider. That's why. But that doesn't mean that we have to stick in our level. No, we have to, because eventually there will be some people who will support you and will understand you. I thank you for your this book club and you widening by this conversation with my colleague and Rebecca, and widening my perspectives and my horizontal. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Brilliant, thank you. Ranjini?
I'm just going to agree with Huda. Hearing so many different perspectives kind of puts a new light to the whole book club that we've been doing so far. It was very enlightening. Yeah.
Thank you. Maisara?
I have nothing else to say, but great discussion. So yeah, everything is good. All good.
All right, brilliant. No regrets joining our book club?
No, never.
Okay, Rebecca, final words from you.
Yeah, thank you everyone. But actually a few weeks, I think 2 weeks ago, I had this conversation with my sister about the African in US, because she actually went to US for 3 months to work travel. And she was complaining about how the Africans are being very loud and tough. And I'm trying to tell her that, yeah, I haven't been there, so I don't know how it is. But if you trace it back to history, you know why they are like that, and you read a lot of their writings. And my sister was like, no, you don't understand. That's the past, ma. So yeah, sorry, my Malaysian slang came out. But
okay, it shows you're very comfortable with it, so we're very honored right now.
So she was giving all these kind of thoughts, and to me, I'm like, I'm done for arguing with you, so I just walked off. But it feels like a lot of people don't actually understand. They see from the outside view, and you just see by their behavior instead of going deep into how their life is and their history and into their mental emotion state. So it's kind of like, a bit frustrating, but well, I think this book kind of opened up a lot about what the Africans are actually going through. Even probably until now, we don't know. There are a lot of interracial couple in US, but we really don't know what is inside them.
Yeah. And sometimes this is one thing I've noticed as well. People tend to exert their sense of agency by making themselves loud and by making themselves more vocal and so sometimes people use that kind of a strategy to show that I'm in control, I'm in charge of my life, I know what I'm doing, I set my own path and society does not have any say. That's that element as well, so you're right. But I think the point that we all have reached is that we just don't know one another until we make time to kind of like engage and find out and communicate. Maybe Chris, the character of Chris is an important character that we need to kind of like probe and also see how does he empathize, and are the things that he does are things that Angie Thomas is indirectly hinting at the white society. Maybe these are some of the things that you need to do. Spend time with the African-American counterpart and get to know us and maybe see another side of us rather than the side of us that you see in the social media, in rap music, in hip hop music or videos or in gun violence or even in the news. So there's always room for us to grow as humanity and members of humanity. All right, so thank you so much, everybody, for that very engaging discussion. I hope you will join us for our upcoming book club series after Hari Raya.
When is that?
We are looking at on Wednesday also. We are looking at Born a Crime by Trevor Noah.
Oh.
Let us know if you wanna join us. We will include you in both to Rebecca and Maisara.
Okay.